on IT infrastructure. Let's start imagining infrastructure as code and think DevOps and SRE. And we'll go into details on that. And we will then switch to Ansible as an open source tool used for automation. That's where Shreya will take over, and we'll conclude with a Q&A. So what is automation? And this is the dictionary meaning that you see at the top, right? And when you read it, and I will let you read it, especially the first and second part, a lot of the description over there is alluding to machinery. It is talking about operating or controlling devices without continuous input from an operator. So a lot of the definition you see is around that. But in the last almost 15, 20 years, we have started seeing automation applying in the context of software development. And then we are seeing a lot of automation emerge in the space of IT infrastructure management, right? So when you look at IT, the text in blue is what we are noticing as a definition for automation. It is you're creating a module, which is basically taking a set of instructions for repeated processes that happen and build that module to replace the manual work that happens in traditional and cloud deployments. When you put automation in context, right, you take manufacturing, I'm just listing some areas so that you have context. Take manufacturing, you look at automation as fixed automation, which is like your assembly line one. You look at programmable one, where you have provided certain inputs and the automation operates in a way. Some of maybe the packaging stuff or some of the robotic control stuff, right? And flexible one is something you dynamically program, and we see this again with robotic way of operating, right? So those are different types of automation when you look at manufacturing or automotive or some other related industry. When you look at software, you're seeing a lot of automation in the area of code generation. And you see that testing has been an age-old favorite for automation, right? We do love our journey as testers because we get to know what an end-to-end looks like for the product that is being developed. But then slowly we start wanting to look at higher value things and we automate all the J units or the functional units of testing and stuff like that. But then when you switch to the infrastructure, which is actually running those applications. So think of what is going on now, right? The load on, be it the media and entertainment, the load on the virtual meetings. Just think about what is happening. It's suddenly scaled in the last 40, 50 days because of the situation we are all going through. And how was that even made possible, right? If was it that we had to suddenly bring in this army of folks to actually make it happen? It was not that, right? It was the use of a programmatic approach. It was using automation. It was using the skilled people with the automation to actually scale to meet the sudden demand that has come up for the video conferencing tools as well as for media and entertainment. Right? So that is what is automation in context you see. And the one that we will focus on for the rest of our discussion is around infrastructure and around how do you use automation in the context of build and manage. Right? Automation, it's important to understand why we automate because when you graduate or when you're teaching your students, it is very important to understand why does an industry or an enterprise think about it, right? And how does it evolve? Because it makes you start reinventing yourself every now and then so that you start solving more complex problems than doing the repetitive tasks. If you look at how automation has emerged as a critical business component, there are three pillars you can categorize it in: business impact, process impact, and economic impact. From a business impact angle, you always see enterprises wanting things to be done at speed of light. But why are enterprises thinking that? Because we as consumers want that. Think of us as mobile consumers, right? The services that we want them pretty soon. Now, for a mobile service provider to operate, they need the backbone, the infrastructure to meet that way. And for that to happen, they need a lot of automation in place. So So you start connecting stories that when you need it to be quite secured, you just don't want to be scaling, compromising on security, right? And some places have quoted some information for you. I've picked that up from the Red Hat Ansible automation story, and you can see that, like using Red Hat Ansible, when you're trying to meet the speed of light, you're able to still maintain your secure posture. That's what you're seeing. Similarly, with all the enterprises evolving, what is happening is the models automation is providing is agility, flexibility, and resiliency. You're seeing that even now, we have suddenly started seeing the farm to door, right? That becoming even more relevant for us because we are at home, we need our essentials to be delivered. So we are seeing a lot of the platforms emerge to actually provide that. So you want not only the IT providers do that, but the shops that want to operate, they have to be digitally ready to do it. And when can they do it, right? So they also have been participating in the payment mechanisms and all that. They have digitized themselves and they are participating in this. The next one is process impact. You see that today a lot of the processes are automated, they're run by technology and supported by people because what you want to be sure is you want certain consistency in the critical processes that are being run. And with the way the processes are being run and with the way work is being delivered, you see a new kind of structure. You see work to be managed by anyone from anywhere. And you're also seeing the focus on automation leading to employees focus on higher value outcomes, right? So that is the process outcomes or the process impact you see with automation. And it's not always done just for some business and process, but there is an economic, there is an ROI that we all start thinking about, which is return on investment. In common terms, what I spend money on, I want return on that, the value for it, right? Um, so if you look at the economic impact, you're noticing the new models being developed for the business and the enterprises. You're also seeing how you can scale using the software approach for the new workloads that are coming in. And by workload, you can take it as unit of transactions, or you can take it as operations that are happening on the cloud or on-prem. Okay? Moving on, when we start, so over here I spoke about how automation is emerging as a critical business component. You're also noticing in parallel the future of work. In fact, now we are flooded in Twitter and everywhere from all the business leaders about what the future of work is going to be. The media is totally buzzing about this, right? That is one type of model, but to enable the model, there's a lot that goes behind, right? So the future of work actually harnesses some of the key components, okay, to get the work done. Let's start on the right, where we are starting with data. We have already started doing this. How do you use data and insights to generate better business outcomes? The idea is to look at trends, to predict what can happen, right? And to take preemptive actions. So data is already in play. If you look at the automation that has come with workflows, be it robotic process automation or the IT autonomic, you notice them coming in play to actually improve or boost the efficiency and accelerate. You're seeing, and I thought I saw a question in the beginning, and we'll discuss it towards the end. It's about AI infused into automation, leading to intelligent automation. An example that I can give you that I'm experiencing, right? So with a lot of the some of the security incidents that happen, we always want to be ahead. We keep a view of our environments, of our infrastructure. We understand how they're deployed, what is needed. We just take the common denominators. We understand the patterns, and we try to look ahead based on the incidents that are happening out, the alerts that we get on the preventive actions we can take. These are basically modeled through some of the algorithms and fed into the automation. And that's how the intelligent automation plays in. And the last one, which is a very important topic, which is though it says optimizing talent, it is actually in a positive way. It's more about making humans work comfortably with machines. It's together that we are going to deliver, it's together that we are going to work, right? Because the when we spoke about automation, a lot of things are going to be built into the machines. They can do the repetitive stuff, but what we can do is the insights, the views, the outcomes that they produce are stuff we can analyze and work through. This is what we are seeing a lot, even in the medical space, right? There's tons of reports that are getting analyzed by AI models, and they're given to the doctors to enable them to diagnose faster. That is where it is playing in. It is humans with the machines feeling comfortable, and it is only to deliver the services faster and with better quality. We also notice that, not only on one side you're seeing the future of work evolve, but you're also seeing how businesses are defining new models. We are so much familiar with our Uber, Ola models. They have really changed the way we go from a place to another. They've also made us think different. And there's another service that I started using, which is the Easy Drive. And you can actually see how, by changing their models, people are able to serve or provide their business to reach further. So that is going to continue to happen. And as the enterprises actually start embracing all these technologies to become even more cognitive, they will need to adopt the hybrid multi-cloud transformation at a greater speed. And we are noticing that. And when you talk about all this transformation, IT infrastructure plays a very key role. You think, be it on cloud or be it on prem. And just to make you imagine what does an infrastructure look like, it has your servers. You know this. It has your servers, your storage, your data. You're thinking about scale. You're thinking about security. Every time you spin up or provision a new environment, you want to be sure it has everything in it intact. There's no FTP port that is left open. There is no opportunity for somebody to, penetrate through the new provisioning. So you're looking at security very strictly. Compliance is another important aspect when you start looking at infrastructure, be it your network or storage or any of that aspect, right? So now you start imagining this infrastructure as code, just like you write an application. Start thinking about it that way. And you start thinking about DevOps and SRE, the site reliability engineering, right? So keep that. And this is where we graduate to understanding why infrastructure as code is important from an automation angle, right? And how does it really enable the automation? So if you look at how we really define infrastructure as code. It is basically using a high level descriptive language wherein you define what your infrastructure would look like, how can it be provisioned, what are the database connections, what is the operating system in play, you could have multiple running. Um, what are the other elements that you would want to configure, right? So how do you do this? How do you automate this so that it can be done over and over again in a consistent fashion and eliminates the need for developers to do this repetitive task? And using this kind of an automation, you're actually improving the quality of service. Because when you're using a programmatic approach, you're having consistent and predictable outcomes. You're reducing the error that can be caused by individuals executing the provisioning or configuring or patching or doing any of those activities. You are increasing the time to failure because it's standard config that is being deployed. Because automation is in play, the information that is generated from the automation can be curated and can augment the human engineers to actually do much more knowledgeable or take much more knowledgeable decisions. And it allows us as humans to actually move to higher value tasks and focus on that. So that is why infrastructure and code has become an important play over the last few years, and that is a way of automation. And it is actually a key principle of DevOps as well. And here is a small architecture that you can see, or a small deployment model you can see on how when you really want to make a change to an application deployment, maybe you change some of the database version, or you change a configuration and you needed to redo it, right? So when you see that, there's actually a pattern that a DevOps engineer or an SRE commits to, which is then picked up by the pipeline, the CI/CD pipeline, and is then executed, right, using Ansible or using Terraform. Now, these are two open source tools, very popular in the context of infrastructure as code. So over here, you're actually looking at the pattern on how you can actually deploy the pattern, and you're using that just like you would do with code. And you make any changes, you make it to the pattern. So that is how you're actually envisioning, that is how you're imagining infrastructure. And that's why DevOps becomes even more relevant for you. People wouldn't have thought of it that way before, but over the last couple of years only, it's maturing, DevOps and SRE, and it's becoming even more important as we are trying to move a lot of the workloads to a cloud and hybrid cloud model. This is a good segue for us to actually get into some details, right? So what you saw here is a good classic example of an immutable infrastructure. What do we mean by that? That is, when you provision an infrastructure using, and you say it's immutable, it means you cannot modify it once it is done. The way you can change it is by going back to the initial pattern, making the change there and redeploying it, right? It sounds like, is it complex? Is it tedious? But it is not. It is much more feasible and it is much more practical because you have control over what is being changed and how it is being rolled out. Mutable infrastructure is where you can actually modify or update once you provision. It gives you the feeling, oh wow, it's flexible. I can, go and make my changes. Yes, it is useful in certain cases. However, it takes away that benefit that infrastructure as code provides because you've gone and changed. It's suddenly become a custom code. If when you talk, the faculty might know this, when or people doing projects with some of the enterprises, right? If you have code, you like to do it in a very structured fashion. When you fork off and make custom changes, maintenance becomes very difficult. The same case with Mutable, whereas it helps you in certain conditions, but it will take away the benefit that infrastructure as code provides. Another important aspect of IAC is declarative versus imperative approach, right? The way you actually go about IAC. You can choose a declarative approach wherein you know the final state of the infrastructure you want to provision and the automation takes care of it. It's like end to end. The only thing here is you need a very skilled person defining that whole approach to the end to end. Whereas if you take imperative approach, in this case, you have automation scripts to provide the chunks of work that has to be done. And you can do it like one step at a time. When you want to scale, it becomes tedious because remember, you got to take each of it and repeat it over and over again. But then skill wise, you're perhaps okay because that chunk is all individuals can focus on. Each one is doing their bit, it's a chunk, right? So the skills wise, it might be okay. So each of them has its advantage, and based on the situation, people usually adopt one of these approaches. I mentioned there are several open source tools out there, and the popular ones are Ansible and Terraform. In this session, we'll focus on Ansible because I've been playing a lot with the Red Hat technologies over the last 18 months. And I thought you should also know about it because the simplicity and the power of Ansible is something that you'll all appreciate as you hear. I put a small stat over here. You can go to the Red Hat website and also check the kind of return on investment you get through Ansible. And as you learn more, you will see the impact or the areas it can operate on. So what is Ansible automation? So Red Hat is an expert in actually productizing open source and making it available for enterprises. They have defined, they are the pioneers. They've shown how it has to be done, right? And we are now one big happy family. So if you really look at how Red Hat took Ansible and the other open source projects and has actually built the automation platform, you can see how it empowers not only the administrators, but also some of the experts in any team. If you look at the whole aspect over here, it has a very simple automation language construct, and it is used to define what is called Ansible playbooks. So if you see, that is what is a part of the Ansible engine that you see here, a very simple construct. And it also has the aspect of running it. It is agentless, and I'll talk about it in a bit. But then if you want to know who is executing my automation, did it finish? Is that person authorized? Can it actually work for my scaled work loads? Then you start using the tower to give you that information. And like I said, open source is so powerful. The open source community for Ansible is very strong, where you can contribute and you can also use from there. In fact, if you see the number of committers on Ansible, actually this data I have is, I think, end of last year. Last I saw, I think the number of stars or starers on Ansible community is over 40,000. There are over 1900 modules, and I'm told that the downloads are more than 500,000. And if you look at it, what are people looking for, right? They're looking for playbooks or code around networking, around cloud management. And what Red Hat does is through the Automation Hub, we bring in the certified, we certify the playbooks so that enterprises can actually use them for some of their critical applications. And the automation analytics part, as part of Red Hat Ansible automation platform, gives you reports on not only where the automation is executing, the outcome of it, so that there can be some actions taken from it. So if you really look at why Ansible, right, and I alluded to it, simple, and this is very important. And an Ansible Fest report that came last year, which Fest happens usually in the fourth quarter, it spoke about sysadmins who were participating, who just picked up the language, who picked up Ansible as a tool and coding to it with really no additional effort. There was not some complex skill that was needed, and they became productive very quickly. It's quite powerful because it allows you to do a lot of things, and I'll talk about it in my next slide. Agentless is a key construct because when you do not have agents, or when you have agents, consistency among them at the various endpoints is very important. What do I mean by endpoint? Think of it as a server or a construct in the infrastructure that you're trying to manage. So it is very important that all of them remain at the same version, they're secure. So agentless comes in a big play because you do not have that issue. You are able to delegate, you're able to manage who can access what automation, and it also allows you to scale. What can I do with Ansible? You can do a lot of things on all of these platforms, right? You could look at configuration management, you can look at provisioning, you can look at continuous delivery for the applications that you're trying to deploy. You can do a lot of work around patching and security patching, ensuring the health of your environment is good, the compliance check is good, right? And how you can orchestrate. Why is all this important, guys, for infrastructure, right? Because think of the transactions that happen for you. Like I said about the spinning up of environments to process when the load increases. When the festival season comes, we always talk about the load increasing on the internet sales, right? That's happening. You also look at your banking transactions. You want it to be in a secured environment. The infrastructure is very key over there. So each of these actions that Ansible provides enables you to act fast when the scale comes into play, when you're asked to stand up new infrastructure. So that is very important. It is very critical, especially when you tie it to the end result it brings. Think as soon as you start thinking my bank transactions, as soon as you start thinking my medical reports, you will start valuing how automation comes in play and helps do that, right? So This is all the areas, these are all the areas where Ansible can operate, and it enables you to transform to a DevOps model as well because of the nature of how it is structured. And I think it is at this point I'm going to hand over to my colleague Shreya. And it is very interesting. Shreya joined us last year after graduating her bachelor's degree, and she was exposed to certain technologies, and she picked up um, Ansible late last year, and she is so gaga about it that I thought she should come and do a quick run and a demo for all of you. So Shreya, I hope you have access, and over to you, my friend.
Thank you, Sugandha, for that lovely introduction. Good evening, everyone. I will just start sharing my screen and begin. Can you see my screen
Not it, Shreya.
now?
No. Initially, we did see the content to be loading, but yeah, okay. So, yeah,
Yeah,
perfect.
it's coming.
Yeah, please go to the slideshow mode and you can get started.
I think it's some
Uh,
issue on my side. Just a second.
I think when your slide showing, you may want to do the dual screen. I think it's coming.
Yeah, all right. So I will kickstart with the importance of Ansible, and I will brief you about its architecture, post which I will compare it with the other coding languages which are available in the market, and wrap it up with a network demo, which I'm truly the most excited about. So, as of now, I want you all to assume that you're all system admins and your boss has asked you to perform updates and push changes on a data center with more than hundreds of servers. Now, I'm sure that will definitely give you a headache. But let me give you a magic wand, which will do all of this work just by running a single code. Easy, right? So Ansible is just that. Ansible is an IT automation tool that provides you with a platform for you to write instructions for a group of servers and automate all of them. It helps you maintain consistency to manage the configuration easily. Not just that, but it also allows you to automatically deploy the applications in a variety of environments. Now, you guys must be thinking that, smart people can easily develop a script and do all that work. But again, those scripts require coding skills and regular maintenance. That's where Ansible comes into picture. It's simple enough for everyone in IT, yet powerful enough to automate even the most complicated deployments. Ansible is truly the star of automation. And trust me, I'm not boasting when I say this. So let's have a look at the Ansible's architecture. Ansible is a radically simple IT automation engine that automates all your IT needs. So as you can see in this diagram, the Ansible automation engine has a direct interaction with the users who write playbooks, or in simple words, they write tasks to execute the Ansible automation engine. It also interacts with the cloud services and the configuration database, which is nothing but a kind of a central repository that acts as a data warehouse. So once the user is done writing his playbooks in a local control machine, the tasks are pushed to hundreds of managed servers, which are defined in a file known as inventory. Now let's see how the advantages play along with the architecture. Firstly, as Sugandha ma'am emphasized on the fact that Ansible is agentless, it basically means that you really need not install any kind of additional softwares on your client systems for automation, which in turn enables your team to start automating right away without any kind of management infrastructure. Secondly, the time required to get your network up and running is also very low. Therefore, your nodes can be easily added on the go without any kind of hassle. Now, Ansible is also idempotent in the sense that when you're writing your playbook for configuring all your nodes Ansible will first check if the states defined by the playbook is different from the current states of the nodes. And only if there's a difference found in the states, then it will push the changes via executing the playbooks. And lastly, it's very scalable and very easy to pick up because instructions can be easily read and understood. Ansible is written in a coding language known as YAML, which is a human readable data serialization language, which basically means it operates serially. So as you can see over here, I've compared YAML with other coding languages like XML and JSON, and you can clearly see the difference and see how you have to be so specific with the syntax and the brackets, but clearly YAML isn't as complex. All right, so why network automation? Now this is my favorite part because this is where my work comes into picture. So managing networks hasn't really changed in the past 30 years. And if you look into the past at what network engineers are used to doing or like to do is doing things manually. And since network is very critical for businesses, they like to follow legacy operational practices. Now you guys must be wondering what I mean by that term. So basically what I mean is that the network admins used to SSH into each and every network device manually, make changes to those devices, validate, and then log out. But again, since it's a manual task, there might be some kind of configuration drifts and chances of error is very high. Hence, there was a major need to simplify the entire network management. In today's world where most of the projects run on the agile methodology and time to market is key, there are scenarios where there is continuous iteration of the development and testing activities. Changes are made not once, but several times during the day. There might be upgrades and backups of, say, hundreds of running servers before the actual version of your project is rolled out into the customer environment. In such scenarios, it is very essential for the developers to take a backup of all those devices and store it somewhere safely. Now, this is a live case which I worked on in IBM. Here, what I've done is I've taken two Juniper firewall devices called the VSRX just for demo purpose, and I'm storing their backup in the local control machine. But in the real time, what happens is the customer environment is not just pertain to two devices, but it might have more than 100 servers or devices for which backup has to be taken either in case of a disaster event or in the case when your colleague has probably made some unwanted changes which you never wanted. So let me show you a quick demo of this so that you'll get an idea. So this is my local machine over here, and I'm going to take a backup of one of the VSRX devices. So this is the command which is used to run a playbook in Ansible. And it's password encrypted so that only certified users can run this playbook. So as you can see here, a backup is being taken for the two firewall devices, and it shows changed is equal to 1, which means the backup is successfully taken. Now let me do one thing. First of all, it's very important once your device backup is taken, there might be cases where you would want to restore back all those old configurations to the changes which have been made. And trust me when I say this, there are a lot of times when developers make changes to the environment, and the next day they completely forget about what kind of changes were made, which kind of leads to the entire network stack going down. So let me show you a small example of the restore scenario. Now this is one of my firewall devices, and as of now, the authentication method which is used, I'm just going to show it to you. The authentication method used to encrypt the data is pre-shared keys. Now let me just mess it up a little bit and change it to something else. Let me change it to RSA signatures and commit this change. Now I'm going to go back to my local control machine and I'm going to run the restore playbook. All right, so first it's going to ask me whether I really want to restore. Yes, I want to go ahead. Now here, these are all the device backup files which I've taken for the two devices. So as you can see, on a particular day, I've taken backup at different timings. And that does usually happen because you might make a change and then again you would want to take a backup of that and then again do the same thing. So I would want to restore the latest file, the backup which I just took. I'm going to put in the time. And this playbook is actually giving the user a granular control because you're able to input not just the date, but even the time. Again, you can see that the changes have been made. So I'm hoping that it's back to the pre-shared keys method. So let's see if the change has been made. Ta-da! It's done and it's that simple. So that's why I say Ansible is very easy and very convenient. So I'm hoping you guys will also do a hands-on with something similar, and probably you can send me some of your work on LinkedIn, and we can discuss over it. So that's all for my demo. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Shreya. If you can just quickly go to the last slide, and while you're doing that, so all of you can, there was actually a question, is Ansible open source? Yes, it is. In fact, I suggest you go to the open source community, and I can paste the link. Maybe Shreya, if you can just paste the link in the WebEx chat for the open source community. Please do go there and you can learn about it. There are some open learning sessions that you can also take advantage of. I would encourage you to do that, right? So yes, one of the questions, is it open source? Yes, it is. And so just to recap, and before we move on to Q&A, right? We spoke about how automation helps us scale and focus to higher value outcomes. We spoke about intelligent automation, and I saw a very interesting question on data science and AI. I'll come to that. We also spoke about how human and machines are going to team more, the evolution of business models, why infrastructure as code is important and is a key principle of DevOps, and how Ansible as a leading tool for IAC is helpful given its simplicity and its secured strength that it has. So with that, thank you for listening, and we can switch to Q&A over here. So we actually picked some of the questions, and let me just see. So is Ansible open source? We did. What is Automation Anywhere? That is a robotic process automation tool or a platform or a framework, you can say. It is similar to what another vendor called Blue Prism provides. The idea of this is to create your virtual agents or your robots on some of the human tasks that are being done and automate that using the framework that they provide and execute on that. So that is what is Automation Anywhere as well. And there are many other uses that people can look at. So two questions. Is it true that many of the machine learning algorithms used in data science is automated? Yes, the modeling aspect and the way you can actually generate the outcome, automation does come in over there. I mentioned about intelligent automation. It is actually possible when you take the model and you start feeding in different variables to it, and you are looking for the outcomes, right? So yes, there is automation in play. And also the example of medical science that I gave you, wherein the ingestion of the records, the generation of the models from those, and providing the doctors the whole capability of fast diagnosis, that is all an outcome of automation, right? how you define your models, how you make it repeatable. That is the whole aspect on automation on that side. The next question I see is, currently I do not have any automation in place in my project, but I want to implement. What would be my steps? So if you're in a software development project, then your approach would be, test automation is where you start always. You start with the units, the functional, and then get to the system. If you're in the infrastructure space, you start with Ansible, I would say, and you start looking at what are my repetitive tasks, how many incidents occur on my system, what are the kind of issues we face with our infrastructure deployment, what is the scale, when do the demands increase. You start analyzing a lot of that, right? And you start determining where automation will help you bring a better outcome, a consistent outcome. So you need to look at efficiency, you need to look at the quality, right? And you need to look at the cost at which you're building this. Sometimes it's not worth automating also, right? You have to determine that, because the value, the quality and the cost together will determine, if you want to go ahead with an automation or not. So you can start that way. You can look at the repeatability in your environment, the kind of issues that come up in your environment, and how you can actually better those or improve those. There is a question which says, how is Ansible different from Puppet? We spoke about Ansible helping with configuration management as one of the capabilities, right? Puppet is used a lot for configuration management. Whereas Ansible, you can do provisioning, configuration, deployment. We saw about that, right? When we discussed about Ansible. Let me just quickly see if I can bring that chart up for you. Yep, it's right here. Let me just bring that. So we spoke about Ansible supporting all these capabilities. We spoke about orchestration, config management, app deployment, provisioning, and all of that. Whereas when you look at Puppet, it is used a lot for config management. Also, in our experience, you have to write your configurations in Puppet specific language. But like what Shreya showed you, you use YAML for Ansible, which is very close to English and very easy to learn and pick up. There's a lot more we can go on. It's very specific, but I thought I'll give you a quick differences that we observe, right? The next question I see is, there was a question on, can you give some steps on how to do network automation using Ansible? Shreya, why don't I let you give some of the high level steps? You did demonstrate, but maybe people are curious on how it can be done. So why don't you just explain at a high level how one can achieve that?
Sure, Sugandha. So Ansible Galaxy is basically a community wherein you have a lot of modules which you can utilize. So in the demo that I showed you, as I said that I've used Juniper devices. So with respect to Juniper, there were network specific modules which were present in Ansible Galaxy. So first up, you have to figure out what kind of a module you're looking for, what is your use case. So once you're done with that, in my case, I used something called Juno's config, which was an inbuilt module with respect to Juniper. That kind of made my life very simple. So once you've identified that module, you just have to have a control node where you're going to define the inventory. Inventory is nothing but all the hosts that you want to apply your automation on. Once you've included those hosts, just write your playbook and along with that module and run it on the managed nodes. It's that simple.
Hope that helped. Thank you, Shreya. The other question I have over here is it possible to choose Python as a language for automation? You can, and actually Python is used in few places, and it's also another good language that can be used. I was also going to drive you towards a point on one of the aspects with automation around containers, Python plays a very key role in that. You can either use the YAML approach or you can also use the Python approach. And Shreya, do you want to add some points on how people interchangeably use them?
Yeah, sure, Sugandha. So, Python, since I said that YAML is a serial language and it's a human readable language, so that's the reason it's more preferred over any of the other coding languages. And of course, it does support a lot of advanced data structures. So once you start working with Ansible, you'll figure that on your own, like key value pairs, dictionaries, lists, all of that. So, including all of that under one hood, Ansible is way ahead and way better for automation as compared to your Python or any other language.
And thanks, Shreya. The next question is Ansible capable of large file transfer over 2 VMs? And what are the options for Windows Server? So the specifics you can actually look up, but Ansible is definitely the way you code your playbook, the way you allow for the transfer or even management, Ansible supports that. Um, and you can, for the specific question that you have, the options for Windows, I would encourage you to go look in the Ansible website. I do not have that offhand, unless Shreya, in your coding, do you have that bit? They're asking, is it over SSH or WinRM?
So it's over SSH when you talk about your Linux, but it's over WinRM when you talk about the Windows server. Again, it depends on what you're working with. Let me give you a small example. Like here, I work with network devices. So in order to connect to my servers and to my firewall devices, I used netconf, and I could have even used netcli if you guys are aware of these connection methods. So yeah, if it depends on what you're using and what your end node is. I hope that answered your question. And I mean, you can always look up to the Ansible documentation for such kind of specific queries.
This is a very interesting question. Red Hat Cloud supports automation framework, and how is easy or difficult it would be to plug in Ansible with other cloud environment and also for containerization journey? It's a very good question. In fact, that's the beauty of Ansible, I would say. Uh, well, it's definitely supported on IBM Cloud and the work we do. But if you go and look at Azure or AWS, in fact, Azure totally bets on Ansible to provide the automation for its cloud operations. In fact, they have strengthened a lot of that using the Ansible automation. There is a whole report out there and a statement made by Azure on how Ansible supports automation in Azure cloud. Similarly, AWS also has a tighter integration, and it has always supported, and Red Hat has worked with them to actually make it happen. So um, that way it is very helpful. And for the container journey, automation is actually evolving to a new space as well. So if you take the Ansible automation, it is currently used for the installation, deployment, and scale, and all of that. But then inbuilt framework of containers called operators are also using the Ansible playbooks to actually enable that way of working. So operators is another way of working in containers. And you can use Ansible playbooks out of there or Ansible automation over there. So yes, Ansible is definitely supporting all the other clouds, and it is also helping with the containerization journey. Let me see if we can pick one last question over here. I think, the question is, what is Ansible Tower? We actually discussed about it. It is a framework which is used to provide you control, delegation, and scale. And what do we mean by that? Basically, how can you it's like getting a centralized dashboard where you can actually see the status of your job. You can see how the activities are executing. You can schedule the jobs. You can get alerts on these um, jobs and their outcomes. You can also use it to manage and track inventory. You can do delegation, which is role-based control using the tower. You can also define new automation workflows, and you can actually um, use or configure or use it also to determine your scale out that you need to do as your workloads increase. So that is what is Tower in a nutshell. But there's more you can go and read from the website. Um, any other question? I think that's it for now. Um, let's see if there's anything else on the chat. Okay, would there be any licensing model or is it free source? So you have Ansible open source, and you can actually use that based on your requirement. But if you're trying to use the Red Hat, and then of course follow the term, right? The support and everything is different. When you need that, you end up actually having a model that you sign up for. And Red Hat Automation actually provides you the enterprise version with the support, and that's a paid version. And what was the other question? I can take one last over here. Just scanning through this. Okay, I think this is a question for you, Raghavendra. Will we get certificate for whole SAC? I think that is a question for you.
I'll take it up, ma'am. This is a series of webinars we have got for 6 days from yesterday till 1st May. So we have mentioned that also those who attend all the webinars as well as some Q&A sessions will be there. So those who participate actively, for them the certificate will be given. So that we will take care, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. And there's one question which is what language is used for Ansible? YAML, like what Shreya was showing, that is what is used. And anything else? I think that's it for now. I know there are more. Please do reach out. You can, I've written my email. If you have any specific questions, we can do that. And if there is another session needed, we can actually definitely do that as well. Over to you, Raghavendra.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sugandha, and also Shreya. So it was very insightful session on usage of Ansible, and definitely the crisp demo what Shreya demonstrated was helpful. I guess like students would explore more on using Ansible and start with some projects internally, and probably in coming days, I think like we would be having a deep dive sessions from you guys as you have made the introductory session so exciting. So with this, like we would be concluding today's session, and a note to all the participants: please do join for tomorrow's session, which would be Introduction to Data Science by Dr. Gopala Krishna Sharma, Director Digital Channels. And before we wind up, do you have any last comments, Sugandha or Shreya?
Yeah, no, I want to thank. This has been a very interactive audience, and thank you for giving us this opportunity. In fact, I still see the questions flowing in, and I'm so tempted to stay back and respond. It's just that I need to run to a few other aspects. So I'll just take one more, right? Can you kindly share a simple use case where students can try Ansible? Shay, do you want to answer that before we wind up? Because someone is very eager and I don't want to leave them disappointed.
Yeah, sure. Okay, actually, Ansible as a whole is very simple. Um, Simple use case. Okay, it's pretty simple. You have to, as one of the people they asked about if we can transfer large files from one VM to another. You can probably work on that and just push or copy any text file from your local control node to the managed nodes. That's the first kind of code which I started working with. I wrote a text file and I just copied that file to five to six servers. So try that, and probably you can reach out to us for more advanced use cases.
Great. Thanks, Shreya. I knew you would give a really good one. Thank you. Okay, friends, thank you so much. Stay safe, take care, and we hope to see you playing with Ansible very soon. Thanks, Dr. Sujata. Thank you, Chengappa and Raghavendra.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you everyone for having us. It was really amazing session, and I hope you guys had fun learning. Just try your hands on it, and all the best.
Thanks, Shreya.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye-bye. Good evening.